My name is Natalie Bennett. I am 31 years old. 3 years ago, my in-laws began turning my husband against me, claiming my nursing job came before family, and our son needed a better mother. Their pressure slowly cracked our marriage until it felt like I was living with strangers in my own home. But 2 weeks ago at their house, my mother-in-law shoved me down the basement stairs by accident while I carried our 4-year-old son's toys. The whole family watched without helping. Now, in this Fargo hospital with fractures and bruises facing their custody filing, I am filled with resolve. I will fight to protect my son no matter what they throw at me. Have you ever felt your in-laws slowly rewriting your own family story until you barely recognized it? If this hits close to home, drop a like and share your experience in the comments. I read every single one, and knowing we're not alone in these messes really means something. Let me take you back to how it all started, because looking at it now, the signs were there long before that awful day in their house. I met my husband at a community health fair right here in Fargo 8 years ago. I was working the clinic booth, handing out flu shot information, and he was there with his construction crew looking all rugged and charming in his work boots. He asked me for coffee after my shift, and for the first couple of years, everything felt easy and right. We got married in a simple ceremony at the local community center with just family and a few friends, and I honestly thought we had the kind of partnership that could weather anything. Our son Jackson came along 4 years ago, and that is when the shift with my in-laws really picked up speed. My mother-in-law, Evelyn Bennett, and my father-in-law, Victor Bennett, had always been polite on the surface, but after Jackson's birth, they started inserting themselves into every decision. My mother-in-law would call me at the clinic during my lunch break to remind me that a good mother would have chosen to stay home instead of returning to work so soon. My father-in-law would nod along, never saying much himself, but never stepping in either. I brushed it off at first, telling myself they were just old-fashioned and worried about their only grandson. My husband would laugh it off too, saying his mom had always been a little intense, but she meant well. Life in Fargo felt normal enough back then. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house on the west side, close enough to the clinic, where I worked 12-hour shifts as a nurse, and close enough to my husband's job sites that he could get home for dinner most nights. Jackson was a happy, energetic little boy who loved building block towers and asking a million questions about everything. I thought we were doing okay. But little by little, the comments from my mother-in-law grew sharper, and they always came from her first. I remember one ordinary Sunday afternoon about 18 months ago when we were all at their place for a casual backyard barbecue. Jackson was playing with some toy trucks on the patio, and I was helping clear plates. My mother-in-law pulled me aside near the grill, her voice low but cutting. "Natalie, honey, don't you think it is time you stepped back from that job? Jackson needs stability, not a mother who is always rushing off to the hospital. My son has been telling us how tired he is carrying everything." She said it with that sweet smile she always wore in front of other people, but her eyes were cold. My father-in-law stood right there, sipping his iced tea, and instead of backing me up, he just cleared his throat and changed the subject to the weather. My husband shifted uncomfortably on the deck, but did not say a word. I felt my stomach drop, but I smiled back and told her I loved my work, and we were managing fine. That night at home, my husband and I argued for the first time in months. He said maybe his mom had a point, and that the extra money for my shifts was not worth missing Jackson's milestones. I reminded him that my paycheck covered half the mortgage and most of Jackson's preschool. He sighed and dropped it, but the seed was planted. From then on, the small violations kept coming, always started by my mother-in-law. She would forget to invite me to family lunches, and then act surprised when I showed up. She would text my husband photos of Jackson looking sad at daycare and ask why I could not be there to pick him up myself. My sister-in-law, Courtney, started chiming in too, but it was always after my mother-in-law set the tone. My sister-in-law would call me on my way home from a late shift and say things like, "Mom is just trying to help, you know." Some women are built for the full-time mom life, and that is okay if it is not you. The sarcasm dripped through even over the phone. I started noticing my husband taking more weekend jobs and staying out later, blaming it on work deadlines. I told myself it was stress. Then came the weekend that changed everything. My mother-in-law had insisted we all spend Saturday at their house on the edge of town, the one with the big unfinished basement they use for storage. She said it was just to celebrate Jackson turning 4 and that she had bought him a new playset. I agreed because I still wanted to believe we could all get along for our son's sake. We arrived around noon. Jackson ran straight to the toys my mother-in-law had laid out. My husband helped my father-in-law move some boxes while I unpacked the snacks I had brought. Everything seemed normal until mid-afternoon. I was carrying a box of Jackson's favorite trucks down the basement stairs so he could play safely away from the cold wind outside. My mother-in-law was right behind me. She suddenly reached for the box, saying she would help, and in the same motion, her shoulder connected hard with mine. I lost my balance on the second step. The box flew, Jackson's toys scattered, and I tumbled the rest of the way down, landing hard on the concrete floor. Pain shot through my ankle and ribs. I heard Jackson cry out from the top of the stairs. My mother-in-law stood at the top, hand over her mouth, calling down, "Oh no, Natalie, I slipped. Are you okay?" But there was something in her voice that did not match the words. No one rushed down right away. My husband finally appeared, looking pale, and helped me up, while my mother-in-law kept repeating how it was just an accident and how clumsy she could be. My father-in-law muttered something about watching your step in old houses. My sister-in-law stayed upstairs with Jackson, whispering to him that Mommy would be fine. I was hurting, but I insisted we could still drive home. My mother-in-law would not hear of it. She said I should rest in their guest room and that they would keep Jackson entertained. Something felt off, though. While my husband helped me upstairs, I overheard my mother-in-law on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low and urgent. "Yes, it happened, just like we discussed. She is out of commission for now. We need to move fast on those papers." The call ended before I could catch more. My heart started racing faster than the pain in my side. Later that evening, after the ambulance had come because the swelling in my ankle would not let me walk, I lay in the hospital bed, here in Fargo, while the doctor explained I had a fractured ankle, 2 cracked ribs, and severe bruising. Jackson sat beside me, clutching his favorite truck, looking scared, but trying to be brave. My colleague, Laura Simmons, popped in on her shift and gave me a worried look. She whispered that my in-laws had already been by the nurse's station, asking about custody forms and insurance details. That was when the real weight hit me. I remembered all the little comments over the years, the way my mother-in-law had slowly turned every family moment into a test of my worth as a wife and mother. My husband had been distant for months, coming home late, and barely looking at me. And now this. As I lay there trying to piece it together, the door opened, and my mother-in-law walked in, carrying a bouquet of flowers, smiling that same sweet smile. "Sweetheart, we are all so worried," she said, voice dripping with concern. "You really should have let me carry that box. But do not you worry. We will take care of everything while you heal. I already spoke with the lawyer about temporary arrangements for Jackson. It is what is best for him right now." Her words hung in the air like ice. My father-in-law and my sister-in-law stood behind her in the doorway, nodding. My husband was not even in the room. I felt my chest tighten, but I looked her straight in the eye and said nothing yet. Because in that moment, I realized This was not an accident at all. It was the beginning of something they had planned, and I was going to need every ounce of strength I had left to fight it. The room stayed quiet for a beat too long after my mother-in-law dropped that line about the lawyer and temporary arrangements. Jackson squeezed my hand tighter, his little fingers still sticky from the hospital juice box Laura Simmons had brought in earlier. I could see the fear in his eyes, the same 4-year-old who used to run around our backyard without a care, now looking at me like I might disappear. Before I could even form a response, the door swung open again, and my husband walked in, carrying a coffee from the hospital cafeteria, like nothing had happened. "Everything okay in here?" my husband asked, his voice casual. But I caught the way his eyes flicked to my mother-in-law first, checking for her cue. She turned to him with that same sweet smile, the one that always made outsiders think she was the perfect grandmother. We were just discussing what is best for Jackson, while Natalie heel steer. I spoke with Stephen Brooks, our family attorney, and he thinks a short-term custody adjustment makes sense. Stability and all. My stomach twisted. Stephen Brooks was new to me, but the way she said his name like he was already on speed dial told me everything. I had never met the man yet. Here he was, suddenly part of our nightmare. My mother-in-law did not wait for my reaction. She kept going, her tone laced with that cold sarcasm she reserved for me alone. "After all, Natalie, your job at the clinic keeps you gone for those long 12-hour shifts. A boy needs consistency, not a mother who is always one emergency away from leaving him with strangers. We are only thinking of Jackson here." My father-in-law stood there, nodding once, then let out a short, forced chuckle, like he was trying to lighten the mood. "These things happen in families, Natalie. No need to make it dramatic." He did not look at me when he said it, just patted my husband on the shoulder and changed the subject to how the construction crew was handling the latest job site delay. No real defense of me, no pushback on his wife. Just that quick pivot, like the whole conversation was already settled in their minds. My husband shifted his weight from one foot to the other, then surprised me by speaking up in a way I had not heard in months. "Mom, maybe we should talk about this later. Natalie is hurt, and Jackson is right here." His words sounded almost protective, but there was a defensive edge to them, like he was caught between us and did not want to pick a side yet. He glanced at me, something flickering in his eyes, but he did not come over to hold my hand or sit on the bed. Instead, he stayed near the doorway with the rest of them. My sister-in-law piped up right on cue, stepping closer with her phone in hand like she was already texting someone. "Come on, Natalie. Do not make this harder than it has to be. Mom has been carrying a lot of the load lately, picking up Jackson from preschool when your shifts run late. It is not like we are strangers." Her words dripped with that fake concern, but I could hear the jab, underneath the same one my mother-in-law had been planting for years. I swallowed hard, the pain from my cracked ribs, making every breath sharp. Laura Simmons, who had been lingering just outside the door pretending to check charts, finally stepped in fully. She was my rock at the clinic, the one who had covered my shifts more times than I could count these past few months. "Mrs. Bennett, visiting hours are winding down, and the doctor wants Natalie to rest. Maybe we can table the custody talk until she's discharged." Her voice was professional, but I saw the warning look. She shot me like she sensed the same undercurrent I did. My mother-in-law waved a hand dismissively. "Of course, we are only here to help, but Stephen Brooks will be stopping by tomorrow with some preliminary paperwork. Just standard stuff for a family in transition." She leaned down and kissed Jackson on the top of his head, then gave me one last look that said she knew exactly what she was doing. As they filed out, my father-in-law, trailing behind with another awkward chuckle about how hospitals always smelled the same. My husband lingered for half a second. "Get some sleep," he muttered, not meeting my eyes fully. "We will figure this out." Then he was gone too, leaving me with Jackson curled against my side and the beeping of the monitors filling the silence. That night, once Jackson had fallen asleep in the pull-out chair, Laura slipped back in on her break. She closed the door softly and pulled up a stool. "Natalie, I do not like this. I overheard your mother-in-law on the phone earlier in the hallway. She was asking about life insurance details tied to your policy at the clinic, the one that covers the family. Something about accelerating a claim if things got complicated." My blood ran cold. The policy was worth $250,000, the kind we had signed up for when Jackson was born, because my job offered it cheap, through the hospital network. I had never thought twice about it until now. Laura pulled out her phone and showed me a quick note she had jotted down. I wrote down the time and what I heard. "If you need it, my neighbor Mark Reynolds is a private investigator who does work for family cases. He owes me a favor from last year when I helped his wife through a tough delivery. I can call him tonight. Mark Reynolds, another name I had not expected to need in my life, but the way Laura said it made me realize how deep this might go." I nodded, my mind racing. The fall down those basement stairs replayed in my head the way my mother-in-law's shoulder had connected so deliberately. It was not clumsiness. It was a setup, and now they were moving on the custody angle to isolate me while I was laid up. The next morning, true to her word, my mother-in-law showed up, alone at first, carrying a folder. Stephen Brooks trailed behind her, a slick-looking man in his 40s with a briefcase that screamed expensive. He introduced himself politely enough, but his eyes stayed on the folder. "Mrs. Bennett, I have reviewed the situation with your in-laws. Given your injuries and the demands of your nursing schedule, they have proposed a temporary guardianship arrangement for the next 6 months. It is in Jackson's best interest." My mother-in-law cut in before I could speak, her voice sharp and laced with that long-held resentment I could finally hear clearly. "You have always put that job first, Natalie. Even when Jackson was a newborn and crying all night, you were back at the clinic after 4 weeks. We have watched it wear your husband down for years. He deserves a partner who is present, not one who is always exhausted and distant." She leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing. "This is not about punishing you. It is about giving our grandson the mother figure he actually needs right now." The words landed like punches. I felt my face heat, but I kept my voice steady. "This is my son. I am his mother." Stephen Brooks cleared his throat and slid the papers across the tray table. "Just review them. No pressure today." But the pressure was already crushing me. Jackson stirred awake, then asking for his dad, and my mother-in-law swooped in to distract him with a story about the new playground they wanted to take him to, completely ignoring me. Later that afternoon, Mark Reynolds showed up, quietly introduced by Laura as a friend stopping by. He was a tall guy in his 50s, the kind who blended into any crowd but had sharp eyes that missed nothing. He sat by my bed while Jackson napped and listened, as I recounted the whole weekend, the barbecue, the basement, the phone call I had overheard in the kitchen. "I will look into the insurance angle and Stephen Brooks's involvement," he said low. "But from what you are describing, this feels coordinated. Be careful what you sign." His words hung there, another mini bombshell. Coordinated. The word made my skin crawl. I thanked him, and he slipped out just before my husband finally arrived alone that evening. This time, my husband looked different, more worn, like the weight was starting to crack him too. He sat on the edge of the bed and took my hand for the first time in days. "Mom means well, Natalie. She's always been protective of Jackson. Maybe a little break for you to heal is not the worst idea." I pulled my hand back gently. "A little break? They are trying to take him from me, Brandon, and that fall was not random." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Then, in a move that shocked me, he let out a short laugh, the kind people use when they are cornered and do not know what else to do. You are seeing conspiracies now. Come on, it was an accident. Dad even said the stairs are old and slippery. But his laugh faded fast, and for a second I saw something like doubt cross his face. He glanced at the door like he expected my mother-in-law to walk in any moment. Look, I will talk to them tonight. We will sort this. Yet as he left, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Jackson's preschool backpack sitting on my mother-in-law's kitchen counter with a note attached. Already packed some things for him. See you tomorrow when Stephen brings the papers. My heart hammered. They were moving faster than I could keep up, and the worst part was realizing my husband might already know more than he was letting on. Laura came in for her night check, then her face serious. Mark just texted me. He found something on the insurance inquiry. It ties back to a conversation your in-laws had with the clinic's benefits office 2 months ago. 2 months. That meant this had been brewing long before the basement stairs. I stared at the ceiling as the monitors beeped, wondering how much deeper the betrayal ran. Jackson mumbled in his sleep calling for me, and in that moment, I knew I had to get out of this bed and fight before they took everything. But as the door cracked open again, and my sister-in-law poked her head in with another folder from Stephen Brooks, I realized the real fight was only just starting, and the next move they made could change our lives forever. Courtney poked her head in with another folder from Stephen Brooks, but my mother-in-law pushed the door open, fully stepping into the room like she owned every inch of it. Natalie, it is time to stop playing the victim here. My mother-in-law said, her voice low and sharp with that cold sarcasm she saved just for me. You have been absent from Jackson's life with those endless 12-hour shifts at the clinic for the last 4 years, and now you are lying here injured because you could not even carry a simple box without making a scene. We are only doing what any caring family would do for their grandson. So stop making this harder than it needs to be. My father-in-law reacted with a sudden defensive outburst that shocked everyone in the room. Evelyn is only saying what we have all been thinking, Natalie. He snapped, his voice rising louder than I had ever heard it. This is not about us trying to take over it. It's about doing what is right for the boy. Do not make us the bad guys when you are the one who has been putting your career first all this time. Then just as quickly, he turned on his heel and walked out of the room muttering something about needing fresh air, leaving a thick silence behind him that felt heavier than the pain in my ribs. My husband's reaction hit even harder. He stepped forward, his face flushing red, and instead of backing me up, he blurted out a shocking defensive outburst of his own. Mom is right, Natalie. I cannot keep covering for you anymore. Jackson needs someone reliable, and I have been carrying the load too long while you chase those shifts like they matter more than us. His words landed like a punch, and the way he crossed his arms and looked away told me the pressure from his family had finally pushed him over an edge I never saw coming. Laura slipped in right then with Rebecca Ellis, the court-appointed social worker who had been assigned after my mother-in-law's lawyer filed the temporary custody papers that morning. Rebecca was a straightforward woman in her 40s with a clipboard and a calm but firm way of speaking. She asked me to walk through the weekend again while my mother-in-law stood there smiling sweetly, as if none of this was her doing. Rebecca nodded and said she would schedule a home visit and speak with Jackson separately, but the way my mother-in-law kept glancing at her phone made my stomach twist tighter. Later that afternoon, Mark Reynolds came back this time with printed emails he had dug up through a contact at the clinic's benefits office. He closed the door quietly and showed me the screen. Your in-laws started inquiring about the $250,000 life insurance policy you carry through work 2 months ago, he said, his voice low. They were asking how claims work, if something happened to you, and whether the payout could be directed toward guardianship expenses. It lines up with the phone call you overheard in the kitchen. The words hung there like a bomb. 2 months. That meant This had been planned long before the basement stairs, and my mother-in-law had been the one steering every step. I felt my hands shake as I gripped the bed rail. Rebecca Ellis returned then with the preliminary report saying the court would review the custody request in 10 days and that any evidence of manipulation would weigh heavily against the petitioners. The next morning, they all showed up again, this time with Stephen Brooks, carrying a thicker stack of documents. My mother-in-law took the lead, once more, leaning over the tray table with that vicious personal edge in her tone. You know, Natalie, some women are simply not cut out for balancing a demanding job and motherhood, and that is nothing to be ashamed of. But refusing to step aside now is just selfish. Jackson has been asking why Mommy is always gone, and we are the ones who have been there for him. My father-in-law stayed quiet this time, but later I heard him in the hallway, having a private confrontation with my husband, his voice tight with quiet anger. You need to stand with your mother on this, son. We have put too much into this family to let her ruin it. My husband came back in looking drained, and instead of fighting for us, he just sat there, staring at the floor, his earlier outburst replaced by a numb withdrawal. That scared me more than anything. I called my own attorney that afternoon, a sharp woman named Rachel Torres, who Laura had recommended, and she agreed to represent me pro bono after hearing the full story. The 10 days that followed were a blur of meetings, home visits, and tense phone calls. Rebecca Ellis interviewed Jackson twice, and he told her in his small voice how Grandma had said Mommy might need a long rest, and how Daddy had agreed. The social worker's report came back, noting concerns about parental alienation attempts. The hearing was held in a small family courtroom downtown. My mother-in-law took the stand first, painting me as the unreliable one while smiling at the judge like the perfect grandmother. But Rachel Torres cross-examined her hard on the insurance inquiries, and the deliberate push down the stairs and Mark's evidence sealed it. The judge granted me primary physical custody with supervised visitation for my husband until he completed counseling. It was a partial victory, but the cost hit me like a second fall. My husband chose his family in the end, filing for divorce the very next week and moving back into his parents' house. He told me in a quiet parking lot meeting that he could not go against them anymore, his voice flat and defeated. I kept Jackson, but I lost the marriage, the in-law support network that had once felt like an extension of home, and a piece of trust I will never get back. 2 weeks after discharge, I packed our things with help from Laura Simmons and Mark Reynolds. We moved into a small apartment on the quieter side of Fargo, closer to the clinic, so I could adjust my shifts to be home more for Jackson. Rebecca Ellis checked in one last time and confirmed the order was holding. Jackson still asks about his dad sometimes, and those questions sting, but he is sleeping better and laughing more. My mother-in-law sent one final text the day we left the hospital for good, a short message laced with one last jab. You won this round, but remember who really loves that boy. I deleted it without replying. My father-in-law never reached out again. I still see my husband at the court-mandated handoffs, and every time he looks tired and distant, like the weight of his choice is finally sinking in. The family I thought I married into is gone for good. But Jackson and I are building something new with the people who actually showed up when it mattered. It is not the fairy tale ending, but it is ours, and I will protect it with everything I have left.